Hey everybody, I want to do a review on some hollow nut drivers that are available on the market, and just the ones that I have bought. Uh, I do commercial work, like I would say mostly done smaller commercial buildings, and I'm working on a larger commercial building, and we're working with half-inch all thread and half-inch nuts and stuff, which are the size of 3/4. And now I'm kind of thinking about this stuff more. But if you're in a situation where you are in a smaller commercial space, like I was working on a fire station, and all we had was there wasn't a lot of heavy things that we were supporting. There wasn't like a bunch of big racks for a lot of individual huge pieces of equipment that needed half-inch stuff, and all we really needed was, to run up 3/8 all thread. And I just wanted to give my opinion on a couple of hollow nut drivers. So this is the Klein one that does 3/8 hardware. It originally, I think it's a 5.5 inch. It might be 6. But just wanted to give my perspective on it, because I also got this one from Ratcheting, which is a kit that comes with a 7/16 nut driver and a 9/16 nut driver. And the gimmick here is that you can take a piece of half-inch pipe on both the 7/16 and the 9/16 nut driver size, and you can cut a piece of pipe to the desired length that you're working on a rack. And you can go ahead and just tighten down these set screws, and any length that you would need. If you were prefabbing in a shop, you could cut a piece to be 10 feet if you wanted to, and you could run it up the all thread with the nut and go and do that. And so that was the gimmick that caught me. My personal opinions on this is that it's kind of a bad design. Like, let's say you're really safe, and when you buy this and you have this inside of a bag, I think you'd probably have better results. But my personal experience, I just put this in my rolling boxes where there's like a divider, and when you're rolling your rolling boxes onto a job site, they're handled very roughly on these rocks and stuff, and these will back themselves out over time. So you'll lose these set screws, and then you'll be like, well, I guess I have to buy some set screws. So thankfully this one stayed together, but I almost never use this. I could see some situations where you're working in a space where there's no access with a lift, and you go up in the lift and there's a bunch of ducting in the way, and you can cut a piece like six feet of all thread on this thing, and then you could run up a nut and support the thing that you're looking to support. But and I feel like in that situation happens. But I think this is mostly a gimmick, in my opinion, because what you could also do is, electricians have a lot of extensions, locking extensions. You could just use your locking extensions and then just throw on one of these. You don't need to get a piece of pipe that's 6 feet. You know what I mean? I have two. 6 feet was probably an exaggeration. I have two 12-inch locking extensions for 1/4-inch bits, and like 3 locking extensions for 6-inch 1/4-inch locking extensions. So like that covers me for a lot of stuff. So this is kind of a gimmick, in my opinion. It's a nice idea. Also, under high torque, like let's say you have all thread that's been sitting out in the yard and there's dirt on the threads. Once it starts to lock up, because it's kind of tough, like this will slip. So it's kind of a gimmick. It's also $80. I don't know if they dropped their price, but another thing I had to do, I don't know if this was just my luck, but the 1/4-inch bit locking shank that goes into your impact was too long to lock into my impact, so I had to cut it. And I tried to do it with a bandsaw blade, and bandsaw blades surprisingly suck at cutting tool steel, and just instantly broke a bandsaw blade, so that kind of sucked. But yeah, this guy, if you're thinking about getting it, my personal opinions are that it's not that great. I think it might have its place, but personally, I don't go for this. I don't reach for this. I just use this guy, and So this works on 3/8 hardware, and it's great. It came with a magnet originally, but under a high torque application, the magnet snapped in half inside of there, and I found it on the bottom of some hardware that I was trying to run up later, and I was like, oh, great. But this guy is robust and is really cool. You can also put slender bits in this and like just, you know, save up some space in your bags. But I'm a big fan of this guy. The only thing is that like it fits in between strut, like the lip, like you have a C channel on the strut, right? And it can go into the strut, and it'll fit pretty easily. But if like the strut bends at all, sometimes it's kind of hard to back out. But I hope that situation is obvious with how I described it. But I don't have any complaints about this. I think this thing is awesome. There's certain times when I'm like, oh, I wish I had a little bit extra of the hollow part, but at the same time, like, you're not going to be able to carry a foot-long extension in your bags. So I feel like the 6-inch works like it starts the nut. You know, it gets it started, and then you can just run it up with your fingers from there. I will say, like, I have a great, and this is great. One thing that I did see, which I thought was absolutely crazy, at the shop, I dropped by and they were prefabbing a bunch of racks for us, and these guys had a hole saw, right? And like, let's say they had, what were they working on? They were working on 1/2-inch hardware. So they used a piece of 1-inch pipe, I think, and an 1 3/8 hole saw, and in a drill, right? So they have a hole saw on the drill, and then they shoved in a 1-inch pipe into the hole saw, and then they shot a self-tapper into the side of the pipe, but it was in a way so that the self-tapper grabbed, like the pan head of the self-tapper grabbed the pipe, and also was in the hollow part of the hole saw on the side. So like the hollow part, like on the outside of the hole saw. And then they just hammered the crap out of the end of the pipe, and to the shape of a 1/2-inch nut, so like a 3/4. And then they were just using that on a drill to run up like 6 feet on these pieces of all thread that then had, like, I don't know, it was like a double rack. So they had like a rack here, and then they didn't want to, I don't know. It was just a crazy scenario. I don't know if that situation makes sense with how I described it, but it was an interesting situation. They just had a hole saw, and they self-tappered a couple self-tappers into the side of this pipe that they shoved into the back of this hole saw, like all the way down, and then they just beat the crap out of the pipe on the end, and the end of the pipe could hold the nut. So it was like, I don't know, it was kind of bizarre. It was an interesting way to prefab. I would never have thought of that in my entire life, but this guy is pretty good. I would maybe recommend getting one as a commercial electrician for 7/16. You might use it. I have one. I've only done one job where I ever needed to use 1/4-inch all thread and 1/4-inch like nuts for that. It was a weird situation, but you could get a 7/16 side for a hollow. You could get a 9/16 size for a hollow. You could get a 1/2-inch size for a hollow if you really, really want. Or you could use a shallow socket. Some people say, like, why don't you just use a shallow socket? And my only thing is that I've noticed that you're not able to do things that this thing can do all the time. Like, let's say you have a deep socket, right? It just is, it's the shape of the nut all the way down. Like, let's say it's like a 3-inch deep socket. It's just this all the way down. So, like, let's say you only have, let's say the all thread is the length of my finger, right? And the nut sits right here on the, in the nut driver. So, like, let's say you had, I wish I had a shallow socket on me to show this. No, I'm not going to do it. Okay, so you would have to, the hollowness, the deeper hollowness, and the fact that the nut driver doesn't start really early makes it so sometimes you can, like let's say you only had, like, I don't know, the size of my, up to the first part of my index finger, like, of all thread, and then you had this big, deep, shallow socket. You'd have to put the nut at the tip of the of the hollow of the deep socket to run it up. And if like it's a bad cut or anything, you know, it would be very difficult to make the nut actually start. But the fact that this is all the way up at the front allows you to, even if it's a really short piece of all thread that you're trying to throw a nut onto, that this will always do it. So I would make an argument that having a hollow one helps, because like that being able to put it on to throw it in immediately and throw it onto any length of all thread that's in front of you is really helpful. So I hope that came across in what I was trying to say. But if you want to get this Racketeers one and you're thinking about it, I'd say no, don't do it. It's not that great. This conduit will get loose if there's any high torque application, and save your money. Save your money for stuff that works better.